It's only week 3, and we've already reached the most difficult part of the season in terms of trying to pick what running backs to start. Injuries, guys underperforming. Who do you have in your lineup this week? This video is going to help you make those decisions. Headliner Nation, hopefully you have not hit the panic button on your fantasy season as of yet. And I know this week might be looking grim if you're out there dealing with a lot of running back injuries, but better days are ahead. Let's weather the storm. Let's make sure we get the right guys in our lineup, and we will still be there at the end of the season. But for now, I've got my top 30 running backs for you, and then a few guys that are just on the outside looking in. And let's go ahead and kick it off at number 1 with Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey is going to be going up against the New York Giants on Thursday Night Football. The Giants offense has been horrible. The 49ers defense has been amazing. And if Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers find themselves in a position where they're controlling the game in the second half, you best believe that he's going to be getting a ton of volume and once again will be a top fantasy performer for you this week. Basically the same exact thing for Tony Pollard at number 2. The Dallas Cowboys and their fast starting defense will be getting an Arizona Cardinals offense this week that they absolutely could potentially handle with ease at the start of the game, putting them in a very positive game script when you get to the second half, and Tony Pollard should be able to rack up the volume and will bring upside with it. In week 1, we saw Bijan Robinson dominate through the air. In week 2, we saw Bijan Robinson dominate on the ground. Now, will he do both in a single game against the Detroit Lions? The Lions are going to be missing several pieces on the defense, and because of that, the Atlanta Falcons are going to play them tough at Ford Field. Bijan Robinson, if this is a close game, should see plenty of work through the air and on the ground. Travis Etienne may finally find his upside this week against the Houston Texans. This Texans offense could still put up some points against the Jags, but the Jags should control this game, giving Travis Etienne a ton of opportunity to hit the ceiling that we've been waiting for. And on top of that, Tank Bigsby, no touches in week 2. This is clearly Travis Etienne's backfield. He's on the field more than any other running back in the NFL almost, and because of that, he brings the safety and the upside that you want in a matchup like this. The Carolina defense has allowed the 7th most rushing yards and the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs this season. Make sure you lock Kenneth Walker into your lineup for the huge upside that he is going to bring. Scored 2 touchdowns last week, didn't really have the upside that you would have wanted in the volume, but he's clearly the lead back over ZACK, and he is going to rip off some big plays this week. Pittsburgh defense is currently ranked last against the run, both in terms of rushing yards and fantasy points allowed to the position. For some reason, this defense just has not been able to stop the run. And now you're getting Josh Jacobs, who's looking to bounce back after a very poor performance to begin the season. The guy is only averaging 60 total yards a game, but he's getting targets, he's getting looks out of the backfield. He's still one of the only running backs in the NFL averaging over 80% of the running back carries on his team. Josh Jacobs is also in for a bounce back week against Pittsburgh. The Cincinnati defense has allowed the most rushing yards to opposing running backs this season, and now they're getting the upstart KYREN Williams, who the Rams obviously like enough that they were willing to just get rid of Cam Akers for basically nothing. Williams is Sean McVay's guy, and you've seen it over the first 2 weeks of the season. With all the injuries and everything that we've had to start the 2023 year, it might be crazy to say it, but KYREN Williams may be one of the best running back plays in all of football this week. When you think about dominating defensive performances to start the year, you've got the Dallas Cowboys and you've got the Cleveland Browns. And Derrick Henry is going to have a huge task in front of him to put up massive numbers against this defense. A team that is ranked inside the top 10 of fewest yards allowed and fewest points allowed to the running back position. You're going to be hoping for a touchdown touchdown this week with Derrick Henry. You're probably not going to see a ton of big plays. What we're really hoping for is like 70 to 80 total yards and that touchdown against this superior defense. The Detroit Lions are going to have no choice but to take the training wheels off of Jahmyr Gibbs this week against the Atlanta Falcons. David Montgomery is injured and won't play. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been banged up. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the most explosive weapons this Detroit offense can put on the field, and they have got to show off why they used a first-round draft pick on him. The Atlanta Falcons have done well against running backs, allowing the fourth fewest fantasy points to the position. But in terms of overall, their defense is currently ranked 22nd against running backs right now. Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely could put up some yards against this Atlanta team this week. Let's just hope that some of those yards come with some big plays and some touchdowns. The New York Jets defense this year has felt like bend but don't break. They've allowed quite a bit of yards to opposing fantasy teams. 21st in total yards per game, 20th in passing yards per game, and 20th in rushing yards per game from their opponents, but they're not letting their opponents score very much. Some big plays could be in store for Ramondre Stevenson this week. Is a touchdown likely going up against this defense? No. But if Ramondre Stevenson can give us between 80 and 100 total yards and adding in a few receptions with that, we definitely could be anywhere between 12 to 15 points this week. And if he does give you a touchdown, that's just icing on the cake. Buffalo's defense has been great against the pass, but they're only ranked 19th against the run right now. And Brian Robinson is coming off probably one of the best games of his career so far. Washington is staying very, very balanced. But the great play of Sam Howell to begin the season has allowed teams to really have to stay in between on the run and the pass and not focus on Brian Robinson too much. Kind of like I just mentioned with Ramondre Stevenson. Brian Robinson might be a little bit more hard-pressed to find the end zone this week, but he should still pick up some decent yards on the ground. Raheem Mostert, coming off a huge game last week, now gets a Denver defense that is ranked 11th against the run, but they have allowed a ton of fantasy points to the running back position so far this season. So while the matchup looks pretty good, I am still just a little bit concerned that people are going to get a little overhyped on Raheem Mostert. Now, Mostert was a sleeper of mine this offseason, and I believe in his talent, and as long as he's healthy, I think he holds on to this Miami backfield. But I think we also need to know that some of these performances are going to be very high, and some others are going to be very low. And going against Denver this week, I think this is one. James Cook going up against Washington, if he was getting more goal line carries or work inside the 10-yard line, he would be up inside my top 10 running backs right now. But unfortunately, Latavius Murray and Damian Harris are getting a lot of work at the goal line. We knew Damian Harris was going to, but Latavius Murray out of nowhere last week is kind of infuriating, especially given how many total yards James Cook put up. But the good thing about James Cook is he can snap off a big play whenever the opportunity presents itself. And if he's able to find some open field this week against Washington, a big TD could be in store. Headliner Nation, I bet you didn't realize that I can see into the future. No, I can't see what's going to happen in fantasy football, and I still can't be 100% correct about that. But I can see into the future by telling you that there's going to be several comments down below from people who just looked at the graphics and did not listen to the video, and they're going to get super upset about DeAndre Swift being at 14 and say that he should be higher. And I kind of agree with it. I would like to put him higher. But as of this recording, Kenneth Gainwell still has not been ruled out for the upcoming week. DeAndre Swift is also going to see a much tougher defensive opponent this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have allowed the second fewest rushing yards to running backs, and they have allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to running backs as well. However, they haven't been great against the pass. This to me feels like a Eagles air raid type of week. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, all of these guys going off. While DeAndre Swift might be able to pick up a big play here or there, I think overall we're going to see a decrease in the volume, and I think at this point we're going to see DeAndre Swift lose a little bit of that upside that we saw last week because he's not going to get that many carries in this game. Keep an eye on it. If Kenneth Gainwell Bell is ruled out, I might be willing to bump DeAndre Swift a couple of spots. But as of now, I think this is the perfect place to put him, knowing for a fact that we might not see the upside that he had last week. The Rams defense has been a little uncharacteristic from what we've seen over the last few years, and against the run, they haven't been that great this season. And I would love to put Joe Mixon higher because of that. But Joe Burrow potentially being out this week, and with how this offense has struggled to start the season, it's hard for me to find much more value in Joe Mixon than where I have him at number 15 right now. If you were to tell me, Kyle, he's going to get between 50 and 60 yards, I wouldn't doubt that at all. Really, with Joe Mixon, we need to get a touchdown from him this week. While he might see a decent amount of volume, if Cincinnati falls behind, he's just not going to see the rushing attempts that we would like from a high upside type of matchup. Isaiah Pacheco is going to get a Bears team that is an absolute shambles right now. Their defensive coordinator resigned out of nowhere this week. Their starting quarterback blamed the coaching staff for his poor performance. The coaching staff, I don't even know what they're doing on Sundays at this point. This is a good matchup for Isaiah Pacheco. This Bears team has not been able to stop anyone on defense for the most part so far. Pacheco should have himself a real nice day. Miles Sanders against the Seattle Seahawks could present a safe matchup for us. Miles Sanders just doesn't carry a ton of upside right now, but the Seahawks defense also hasn't been great against the run either. Now, they haven't allowed a ton of yards. They're ranked 13th against the run right now, but they have allowed quite a few points to the fantasy position. Keep an eye out for Miles Sanders to find the end zone this week. Najee Harris has a great matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that has allowed the second most fantasy points to the running back position so far and ranked 27th against the run right now. This has all the makings for Najee Harris to absolutely go off. But Jaylen Warren has started to see some more work, especially in the passing game, which is limiting Najee Harris's upside. And also, per Pro Football Focus, the Steelers have 0 rushing yards before contact this season. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are getting absolutely knocked down before they can even get to the offensive line. This absolutely sucks for Najee Harris's upside this week. While the potential is there, I have to be very cautious with it. Zach Moss has a much tougher opponent this week. Now, he could end up being bumped up a couple of spots if we find out that Anthony Richardson will for sure be out. As of right now, it sounds that Richardson is trending towards not playing. If that were to happen, Moss would go above Miles Sanders for me. But the one issue with Zach Moss as well is that he's going up against a Baltimore defense that has been really good against the run so far this season. The 5th fewest yards allowed to position and the 5th fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. Yeah, Zach Moss had a great week last week, but I wouldn't bank on that type of upside against this defense. After week 1, there was a lot of people that didn't take too kindly to my analysis of Breece Hall, because if you took out his 2 big runs from week 1, he didn't even average 3 yards per carry on the other 8 rushing attempts. And look what ended up happening this past week. Kind of the same thing. Breece Hall was super ineffective. With Breece Hall, we have to bank on the big plays right now. And they're going to come because he still has some of that explosion. But that explosion that we saw from 2022 isn't all the way back yet after that knee injury. If you give Breece Hall a lot of room to run, he's going to take advantage of it. But if he gets stacked up, he hasn't quite regained his legs at this point to make people miss like that. Big plays are going to come and go. Breece Hall's upside is going to come and go. You have to be very careful with him, though, because as of right now, considering the fact that Dalvin Cook is also still seeing looks, Breece Hall is a guy that's really a mid to low end RB2 in terms of safety, with a little bit of upside baked in every once in a while. Miami couldn't stop the run in week 1. In week 2 against New England, they did a whole lot better. So for Javonte Williams, even when you look at the Miami me numbers, they're kind of skewed by a huge week 1 against the Chargers. Javonte Williams is going to be inside my top 30 this week, though. I still think we're going to see him continue to be kind of that 1A to Samaje Perine, and he's not going to see a ton of work through the air. But the hope is maybe he can find a hole or two on that Miami defense, and he can give us a decent performance. So for those of you that have to start him this week, you're not completely upset with it. Tyler Algier is going to continue to be touchdown dependent. He's not going to be a guy that's going to go out and give us 100 rushing yards every single week. But depending on how this Detroit defense bounces back this week with the injuries that they've had, Tyler Algier, even if he only gets 10 to 15 carries, if he can chop off a couple of big plays with it and still average 4 to 4.5 yards per carry on the other touches, a touchdown is definitely in the cards, and an 80-yard day is definitely in the cards as well. Rachaad White's coming off a pretty decent week, but he still barely averaged 4 yards per touch last week. Keep that in mind as he goes up against a Philadelphia defense that, even though they haven't been great against the pass so far this season, they've been pretty good against the run. And Jalen Carter looks every bit of the first-round pick that he was. He's going to have a field day trying to get to Rachaad White this week. Alexander Mattison is taking a big spill for me this week, especially considering that Cam Akers has been added to the roster. Now, will that make a big difference in week 1? Probably not, but Alexander Mattison will probably still lose some touches to Cam Akers. But here's the good thing. If Cam Akers couldn't be an RB1 in Los Angeles, what makes you think he's going to be an RB1 in Minnesota? Him and Alexander are really kind of the same type of running back. They've been highly inefficient at times, and because of that, it's really limited their upside. I don't know what Minnesota thinks they're getting from Cam Akers, but I don't think he's going to be replacing Alexander Mattison anytime soon. Joshua Kelly, very down performance last week with no Austin Eckler, and it sounds like Austin Eckler is going to be out again this week, so he should see a majority of the touches. We got to hope that he just becomes more efficient going up against Minnesota. This is likely going to be a shootout through the air. Him and Alexander Mattison have kind of the same type of upside for me. We got to hope for a touchdown. James Conner looked really good last week, but this Dallas defense is no joke. They limit his upside already. Even if it were to be a close game, James Conner probably doesn't have the upside that we would like to get him closer to top 20. But if this becomes a game where Dallas absolutely shreds Arizona, James Conner loses even more value. Listen, I know people are super excited for Jerome Ford. Those of you that spent a ton of fab to pick him up because you lost Nick Chubb, just be very cautious with all of this. He's going up against a Tennessee defense that has allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs and the third fewest yards per game to running backs. Not only is this a tough defense to run against, but you also have Kareem Hunt back as well. Now, is Kareem Hunt going to walk back in and be the starter right away? Absolutely not. But Kareem Hunt already knows this offense. He knows what he has to do. He knows where he's going to be playing. And because of that, he's probably going to get a few more touches than what Jerome Ford owners would like to have this week. Be cautious putting him in your lineup. Dameon Pierce going up against Jacksonville. The Jacksonville run defense has been very good this year, allowing the 8th fewest rushing yards to the position and the 3rd fewest fantasy points. We want some more upside from Dameon Pierce, but unfortunately to start the year, it just hasn't been there. Am I walking away from Dameon Pierce as of yet? No, but you know what I would look at potentially doing after he has another poor performance against Jacksonville? I actually would probably go and try to trade for him and get him super cheap. At number 29 and number 30, I've got Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. As of this recording, Aaron Jones hasn't practiced as of yet, but there's no guarantee that he's going to miss. Even if Aaron Jones were to miss this game, going up against AJ Dillon, I probably don't change too much here. He's going to be right here towards the bottom end, high end RB3, low-end RB2 type of status, going up against a New Orleans team whose defense has been very good so far this season. If Aaron Jones were to play, he's not going to have the upside that I would like. I would probably put him as like a high-end to mid-end RB2, but I'm not willing to go much higher with that this week. All right, I've got a few guys that are just on the outside looking in. Let me touch base on them real quick. Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. They're going to be continuing to see some split snaps right now. I still believe Gus Edwards is the guy in between the 20s. If you want somebody that's going to get the volume, it's going to be Gus Edwards moving forward for me. But the defensive line for Indianapolis has been very good, and they've allowed the 7th fewest rushing yards per game to running back so far. Neither of these guys have a ton of upside this week. Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson seeing a few more touches, and he's clearly the RB2 in this offense. But Khalil Herbert, from an efficiency standpoint so far this season, has been much better. He's breaking more tackles. He's making more people miss. And because of that, he just hasn't allowed Roschon Johnson to quite take over as of yet. Jaylen Warren, for me, is a flex option in PPR leagues only right now because he's seeing a little bit of work in the passing game. And even though this is a better matchup on the ground for him this week, I'm still not ready to buy into him being a guy that's splitting 50-50 with Najee Harris as of yet. But it could happen soon. Matt Breida stepping in this week for Saquon Barkley, but Eric Gray is probably going to be getting a few touches as well. And to make matters worse, they're facing the San Francisco defense. The only way you're starting Matt Breida is if you don't have any other choice. And then finally, Tony Jones Jr. going up against Green Bay. More than likely, you're going to see Tony Jones Jr. kind of be the lead back this week, unless Kendre Miller is able to work his way back as well. If that's the case, Kendre Miller probably sees a few snaps of his own, but don't forget, Taysom Hill will probably be in the backfield somewhere to boot. Because of all of that, there just isn't really any opportunity or any reason to try and start Tony Jones this week. All right, there you have it, Headliner Nation. Quite a few running backs that we flew through today, and hopefully I give you more than enough information to help you make the decisions you need to win your fantasy league in week 3. Make sure you hit that like button for me. If you're new here to the channel, hit the subscribe button and stick around. And if you have any other questions, leave them down in the comments, and I'll make sure to get to as many as I possibly can. Headliner Nation, peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.